And even in that moment, I still told myself, I do not have a problem. And even if I have a problem, I'm a dude, I'm ex-military, I will solve this myself. That took about another week. I was pacing up and down this beach, and all of a sudden I stood still and I overlooked the ocean, and I felt like I'm at this intersection here. I can keep doing what I'm doing, but that's not going to get me anywhere. Even worse, I'll go deep down the rabbit hole. I won't come out of it. If I want to feel different, if I want to have a different outcome, I'm going to have to start making different choices. And there's only one person that can make that choice, and that's me.
All right, Anton, welcome to the Man Talk Show. How you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, man. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. How are your feet feeling?
My feet are doing pretty well, actually. They've got all the time to heal now. It's the rest of my body that I was worried about a little bit, but no, I'm doing better.
Good. Well, for those who don't know who you are, maybe just give like a 30-second context of what you embarked on this past year in 2024.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a Dutchman, Dutch Army veteran, and I just finished walking from Los Angeles to New York City barefooted, which is a new Guinness World Record to raise awareness for men's mental health. And yeah, finished this November and just got back home and mission complete.
Nice, man. Well, why walk across the U.S. and why walk across the U.S. specifically barefoot?
Well, the barefoot part is, there's many reasons to it, but the main reason, it takes something very out of the ordinary and challenging these days to get attention, to raise awareness. And the barefoot thing is just a paperclip thing. You know, it's as simple and easy as using my two bare feet that do the trick to get the attention, because no one's ever done it before, like on that distance. And well, why, across the US, I think men's mental health is a global issue, but I think the US paints a pretty good picture on how it is right now, and it's not good. So I figured, if there's anywhere I want to create change, it's the US, but also if you want to have like this big ripple effect going to all corners of the planet, do it in the US as well. Like the platform that you can create is way bigger. So there's multiple reasons. And of course, it's a beautiful country. Like I always wanted to go from West to East Coast. Now I just did it in this pretty slow pace.
Yeah, you really took your, like, I'd love to drive across. I actually went across the country. I don't know if many people know this, but when my wife and I got engaged, my father-in-law, who is now 87, I think at the time he was like 81, has a very big fear of flying. And we got married outside of Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada, which is, I'm originally Canadian. And we spent a lot of time in Vancouver and in Whistler. It was like one of our favorite spots. And so we wanted to get married in Whistler in British Columbia. And her dad was like, well, I'm not going to fly there. So if you guys want to do that, I won't be there. And I remember having this moment of like trying to convince him. I was like, come on, man. Like you gotta get over your fear. It's just like, it's just flying. There's all of these things that you can do to help you. And he's at the time he was an 81-year-old man, and he was not having it. He was just like, I'm not flying. I'm not getting on an airplane. He's just terrified. And so I was like, well, you're not missing your only child's wedding. Like you're not missing your daughter's wedding. Like that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so I made a side comment about I'll drive you across the country if I have to so that you can be at your daughter's wedding. And I was kind of half joking at the time. And then, later on, he, probably about a week or two later, we were on the phone. And he's like, so, were you serious about driving me across country? Is that a real option? I've been thinking about that quite a bit, and I think I could probably do that, and I'd be open to it if it was you. I was like, oh shit! But it was it ended up being a really cool experience. A week before my wedding, driving my father-in-law from Somerset, New Jersey. On one side of the continent, all the way across to the other side of the continent to Whistler, British Columbia. And it was an adventure, man. So I can only imagine how many experiences you had. But I'm curious about a couple of things. Number one, what was the strain like for you mentally and emotionally? Because I would imagine that there were mornings where you woke up, your body's in pain, your feet are hurting. No part of you is wanting to get out of bed, let alone continue to walk however many kilometers or miles in that day. How did you deal with some of that mental strain?
The mental, physical, and emotional strain was just out of this world, and I felt that way every single morning. I was like, no, I do not want to do this again. But um, it was showing like one part of this whole journey was to show lead by example, and there's a lot of things I share about mental health, and one thing is that we feel like that often when we are struggling mentally or emotionally that we don't even want to come out of bed. Like getting out of bed is like the biggest task of the day. But then I encourage like just get out of your bed, get through your day, and by the end of the day, you're one day closer of coming out of it. So I got to show now by doing this that I did not want to get out of bed. I didn't want to hurt myself again by walking barefoot through the freaking Rocky Mountains. But I did. And by the end of the day, I was one day closer of getting out of this, but also showing that, you know, you might think this day is going to be this massive challenge with everything you came up with in your own mind. But it turns out to be this awesome, beautiful day, meeting cool people. And sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was just miserable. A lot of times it was. But, you know, it just shows as well, like you never know what the day is going to bring. So just get out of your bed, get the day going. And by the end of the day, you'll be one day closer of coming out of it. And that's what got me going as well.
Well, share a couple examples of some of the hardest moments for you. Because I can imagine, I mean, I've ridden motorcycle through the Rocky Mountains. I've hiked through some of the Rocky Mountains. There's parts of that are very challenging landscape on a motorcycle and hiking. So I can imagine doing it barefoot, but share some of the like really challenging moments. Maybe there's a couple of stories that you have from the journey. Because how long did you walk for? How long did this actually take?
It took me 8.5 months, so 260 days. Yeah, so it was 260 mornings of thinking, I do not want to do this. But I got there. And man, there's been so many moments that were, you know, beyond challenging. I think at first going through the Mojave Desert, there's not a lot of options on roads. And the road I took turned out to be made out of Lego. Well, not literally Lego, but it felt that way. You know, when you miss that one piece of Lego that's in the living room and you step on it, the entire road felt like that. So I figured, hey, you know, these desert roads, you know, the dirt roads. I'm just going to take one of these, and at least it gets me off this road. Well, that turned out to be a bigger mistake because it was just Lego all over the place, but then in the middle of freaking nowhere. And, you know, just nothing, no towns, no cities for days and days surviving on canned food. I was there with my girlfriend. She was in a camper van, but it was just nowhere to get food. So energy got low. And that was just a start. Like that was within the first 2 or 3 weeks that we were like in the middle of the desert. And there was just no end to these roads. Like I would start my day and sometimes you like have these hills or mountains and you would climb up and you'd stand on top of this hill and then you just see this endless long road just ahead of you going straight through the desert. And it just not like I knew like every step I'm going to take of this road I'm seeing ahead of me right now, it's going to hurt, but there's only one way again of getting there, and it's just by taking that step. So Mojave Desert at the start, I think Rocky Mountains, as I mentioned before, there was still 6 foot of snow when I had to do the Loveland Pass. I had to take the Loveland Pass. It's you have the I-70, which is the interstate, but obviously I wasn't allowed to take that. So I had to go all the way around over the mountains. So it was like a 12,000 foot mountain peak with 6 foot of snow. So luckily the roads were cleared of snow, but it's still cold as hell. It was beautiful, and lucky enough, I get into this mindset. I can fully enjoy the fact that I'm just doing it. Like, what the hell? I'm here in the mountains. I see people coming down the mountain on skis, and I'm walking here barefooted. But it was so cold. Like, it was so cold. Like, it gets into your bones. And of course, when your bare skin of the bare feet touch the ground, it just gets into your entire body. So there's no way of heating up as well. But again, I managed to get through it without, you know, freezing my feet off. Still got all my toes. But I think the hardest bit was the Midwest summer heat. Apparently, it was the driest summer in 100 years. There was a lot of drought problems. At least that's what people kept telling us. You know, high 90s, low hundreds, and then the humidity. As soon as we got into like eastern Kansas, Missouri kind of part, man, that humidity just smacked me in the face every single day. It was so relentless. And for 3.5 months, it was just like high 90s, low hundreds, and there's no hiding from it. Like I was out there, it's plains. There's no hiding. There's not a lot of trees. So I was out there in the sun for like 8 hours a day. I burned my feet twice because I was just too stubborn. I thought like I can do another half an hour where I couldn't. So I had to take siestas during the day and just walk at night, which then gets more challenging because people don't see you on the side of the road. But yeah, those were, I think, one of the hardest bits. One particular moment to finish it off with was in the Mojave Desert. Like again, this endless long road, and I went on Google Maps to see like, hey, this is where I'm going, and I told the team like this is where I'll end up. And on Google Maps, it just showed it was one straight road, and I was almost there, but it was like something that Google Maps didn't show. There was an entire mountain in between, and I was pushing this stroller, like a troller, like a dock stroller, and I was just by myself. So there was no way in hell I was going to walk all the way back through the desert to go around and pick a different road. It's like I need to get over this mountain. There was no trail, there was no road, just bare rocks. It was like so challenging that after a long day of walking, I had to pull this heavy trolley up a mountain. And then once I got on top of the mountain, like one guy off the other team, they were at the campsite at the other side of the mountain, and he came up and he told me like, man, you still got a long way down. So it took me twice as long. I had to like Gollum, I was coming down that mountain like on hands and feet. I couldn't stand on my feet anymore. And that was one of those things like, well, you never know what you're going to get. Sometimes, it's a good day and sometimes it's a bad day. This was one of those moments where I thought, this is not my best day. But again, there's only one way of getting there. And it was like up and over that mountain with the stroller. And I made it. It was dark. It was horrible. But yeah, we got there.
And what's going through your head during those moments? Like you're walking through the desert, you're kind of going through a mountain pass, your feet are freezing, or the inverse of that, where you're just getting swamped by the Mid-East, like air swamp, where you're having to go through this other mountain pass. Like what's going through your head in those moments? And then how do you traverse that? Because I think this is very relatable for a lot of guys where it's a little different, right? Because you're not, maybe the guys aren't going through this type of physical challenge, but they're facing something in their life that feels insurmountable and you just want to quit. You want to walk away from it. So what's going through your head in those moments?
Well, the beauty of this is like I saw a metaphor in everything I went through when it comes to like other men going through similar things with their mental health, just different shapes and forms. But and I just let my mind wander and go wherever it wanted to go and without judging it. So you hear so often like your mind is the blue sky and your thoughts are just the clouds passing by. And I really like the one because it's so freaking simple, but it works. And for me in that moment as well, I think because I've been in the army for a long time as well, but also went through my own mental health chapter for quite a while. I learned the tools on how to navigate through these emotions. And whenever I felt angry, I just felt angry and I would scream, loud as hell. I was in the desert anyway. Whenever I felt the emotions come up because I was just so tired, I would just cry. And in other moments, like just before I went up that mountain in the Mojave Desert, I was just doing 360s by myself because I was and like laughing out loud because I was just feeling like, whoa, like look at this. I'm here. I got myself here and it's beautiful. And then I went up to the mountain and I was just swearing like like swearing words was going through these valleys. But I think the most important thing is like I just let everything be. Like every emotion that came up was welcome. And I didn't try to control it. I didn't try to not be angry. I didn't try not to be sad. And it was such a relief that everything was just welcome. I didn't have to force it to be any other way. The situation sucks. There we go. I'm allowed to be angry, but not let it take control over me. So I wouldn't lose myself in those negative thoughts. I would still, like I said, I know these are just clouds passing by. I'm allowing myself to be angry or sad right now. I know this too shall pass. This will get better. and I'll come out on the other side. And that was just, I think that was like a mantra that I was just keep telling myself, was like, this too shall pass. Like whenever I was laughing and having the very best time, I knew this too shall pass. I'll get to be challenged probably like in an hour or so again. And same for when I felt shit. It's like, I know this too shall pass. I will feel better in a few hours, a few days, however long it takes for me to get through this. But everything was welcome. And I think that was the best tool to have with me, to have the knowledge I will get through it, to not lose myself in the emotions and let them just be there.
Yeah, it's the hard part. I just did an interview on modern wisdom with Chris Williamson. And he's got a pretty decent sized platform, and I've been on there a couple of times, but we just did a man's guide to emotions. And it was funny because he's asking, he's very logical and very, very rational and linear. And he's doing his job as a podcaster, right? Trying to extract information for his listeners, which are largely men.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because as men, when it comes to dealing with our emotions, we always want some rational, linear like breakdown of what we do with them.
Yep.
And I think one of the biggest things that I was trying to drive home in the episode is exactly what you're saying, which is one of the worst things we can do with our emotions is to try and stuff them down or ignore them or to repress them instead of actually allowing them to just be there and come up and out in some capacity. And that process of allowing yourself to just feel what it is that you're naturally feeling in any given moment without having to become overrun by it or become that emotion fully, but just to allow yourself to feel it, have some form of expression around it, that is processing your emotions. And over time, you become much more proficient at it. And so it sounds like you had this 8.5 month journey of like emotional processing in some ways that really, I would imagine has led to a different layer or depth of emotional calibration, understanding, regulation, self-trust, all of those pieces. I wonder, I want to back the train up a little bit because we haven't touched on why you actually went on this journey in the first place. Like why trying to raise awareness around men's mental health? What spurred that on?
So I've spent 10 years in the Dutch Army. I did 3 tours to Afghanistan, and afterwards his life happened. So relationship issues, so heartbreak, financial issues, not being in the right job, not being in the right place, and above all, after leaving the army, losing my identity. And I didn't know how to deal with all of that combined. Like I call it Murphy's Law, everything landed on my plate at once. And I was one of those guys that said, don't cry, man up, just keep going. And I learned the hard way, if you don't speak up, it's yourself and the family around you that you're punishing. And I ended up on a cliffside in Sydney in Australia, where I was living at the time, not necessarily wanting to die, but just wanting that pain and endless long dark tunnel ahead of me that I imagined to be there. I wanted that to stop. And lucky enough, I scared myself enough with just having that thought, and I stumbled back and I saw this sign on a fence saying Lifeline. If you're mental distress, call Lifeline. We're here 24/7. And even in that moment, I still told myself, I do not have a problem. And even if I have a problem, I'm a dude, I'm ex-military, I will solve this myself. That took about another week until I was just pacing up and down this beach. I was just in a deep depression. I didn't know how to deal with it. And at some point, I was pacing up and down this beach, and all of a sudden I stood still and I overlooked the ocean, and I felt like I'm at this intersection here. I can keep doing what I'm doing, but that's not going to get me anywhere. Even worse, I'll go deep down the rabbit hole. I won't come out of it. If I want to feel different, if I want to have a different outcome, I'm going to have to start making different choices. And there's only one person that can make that choice, and that's me. And in that moment, I chose to seek help. And before, if people will come toward me, saying you should come to like a mental health coach or whatever, I was like, go hug a tree. It's not my thing. Go float away in your magic carpet, but way out of my comfort zone. But I figured, I'm rock bottom here. I got nothing else to do. I might as well just try it. So I went out. I got help from this spiritual coach, even further out of my comfort zone. But that's when I realized, like, hey, this is doing something to me. She gave me like a few small things to do, like meditation, like mindfulness. And at first, again, with a lot of resistance, I was chewing on a raisin and I had to go through all these sensations like, what the hell am I doing? Or meditation, I had to look for a quiet spot, sit there with my own thoughts, thinking that's the least I want to do right now. But I did it anyway. And along the way, I figured like, hey, but I'm not thinking about my own misery right now. So this is doing something. And it got me onto this journey of just self-awareness on okay, what else is out there. I started reading more books, started listening to podcasts. I watched YouTube videos, downloaded more apps, but most importantly, I started to talk. I bumped into the same people every single day when I was just pacing up and down the beach, and they're always asking, "How's it going, mate?" And my standard answer, "Yeah, good, busy, but good." Standard answer to pretty much everything. And then I realized, like, but I'm lying to these people every time they're generally asking, "How are you doing?" And every time I answered in honesty, when I told them what I was going through, I felt like, hey, I'm not alone, because every time I share it, they share it. And I feel like, so everyone I'm talking to is going through something, and they all have their own tools to kind of deal with it. If they can do it, I can do it. And via that way, I just slowly, made my way out of it. And I came out stronger than ever before, because now I had all that self-knowledge as well. But in that whole process, I learned how big this issue is. Like how many people are struggling with their mental health silently, and even more so, how many men are struggling silently with their mental health because they were like me. They see it as a weakness, and I know now it's courageous to speak up. And if the army told me one thing, it's lead by example. So I now had my story and the tools that I learned, and I wanted to create something so I can share my story and the tools that I learned, in hopes that creates like a safe space for someone else to feel, if he can do it, then I can do it. And, walking barefoot in Sydney, Australia is just a bit more in the culture because you live at the beach. And I was just walking home barefoot one day, and I figured I already promised myself I would take myself through the Himalayas. I wanted to see the highest mountain on the planet as a physical and mental challenge to myself, so I could empower myself again. And I figured, I want to raise funds and awareness for people living in these remote communities. They can use some help. And I'm pretty sure no one's ever done base camp of Mount Everest barefoot, because why would you? It's super uncomfortable. And that's when I thought, I'm just going to be the first person ever to do it barefoot. That way I can generate attention, awareness, and funds for these people living there. And so I did. And as I reached base camp of Mount Everest, like this cliche Hollywood scene where I stumbled towards like this big rock with the height of base camp Mount Everest. And as I touched that rock, like all the emotions came out. Like I was crying and laughing at the same time. And I fully realized I got something here. It's as simple as using my 2 bare feet and willpower to create change for someone else. So that's where the Barefoot Dutchman was kind of born. It's like, I need to use this. And I just kept researching, what mental health means, how it impacts people and how we can change it. And yeah, I just started to use that crazy thing to generate attention for men's mental health, because, in a lot of countries, it's the number 1 cause of death. But, you don't hear, for men, but you don't hear anyone talking about it. So we hear about the flu, but we don't hear about the number 1 cause of death for men, because still this stigma around it. And I just want to show the opposite is true. It's not a weakness. It's an act of bravery. And hopefully this way I get to show that.
Yeah. I love that, man. I mean, it's interesting. There's a bunch of different threads that I want to pull on in there. The first I just want to sort of touch on is, what do you think are the real challenges that guys are dealing with today? Like, what do you see? I would imagine that you had a bunch of, different individuals reaching out to you over your journey. You probably ran into a bunch of people,
Yep.
As you're walking across the country, et cetera. And so what have you seen that men are really struggling with on the day-to-day and within themselves?
I think just not feeling safe to say anything, just having that feeling of always just having to be that rock. And I think it's a very healthy thing to be the rock, but not they have to feel like a lot of men are stuck in just that one way of thinking. So the only side they have is it's very heavy masculine, not particularly very healthy masculine side, where a lot of men are not aware they also have another side that's fully allowed to be there. So the main thing is men do not feel safe to say, I need help. You know, even when you go to IKEA to build this big ass closet, I'll fix this. I'm a man. I'm going to put this together. No, man, like if you do it with a mate, you're going to be twice as fast and you might learn something as well. I think a lot of men see each other as competition, so we don't dare to ask for help to our mates anymore because he's doing this. I need to do this to be a better man. No, like we're all brothers. We're all on the same level. We get things to learn from each other, but that feeling is not there yet because society kind of makes us believe we always have to fight each other instead of just collaborate and work together. So on that level, that's where it starts. Like we have all these responsibilities as men, and they're beautiful, but we don't have like this. How do you say, like an off button? We're always on. We're always working towards something. We're the rock. We'll get the bread on the table. We'll do this. We'll do that. But we don't have like this off button where we can just say, hey, you know what? I want to do this, but I'm not really sure how to, or I'm experiencing some stress or whatever, but I don't have this valve that I can relieve some of that pressure. We just don't know where that button is. We only know the on button, but we don't know the off button. And yeah, that just causes us exactly to be like me at first. To say like, but I'll fix this myself. No, you're going to learn the hard way if you don't speak up. It's yourself that you're punishing. But on the more bright side, that once you do, this whole world of opportunities and solutions will open up. But we're so stuck in this one way of thinking. This is what it means to be a man, and this is what I need to do. And there is no other thing. There are no emotions. I don't have vulnerability. Well, I got a news flash for you. You're just human, like everyone else. You're born with it. The first thing you do when you get born is you cry. It's in your system, and we're just allowed, like anyone else, to show that. And the problem with that is, the solution to that is, I think, like it's just up to us to make each other feel safe. We can have the most beautiful organizations out there that do like the best work to help us, but if we don't make each other feel safe to go there, we're not going there. Like they're useless then. So it's up to us men to level up and just to create that safe space for each other, to say, hey, you know what? If you need any help, I'm here for you. Or if you see a mate struggling that you know for a long time, you know that someone is struggling, even though it doesn't always show. When you've got a mate and there's something going on, there's always little things that you might notice, and just ask, like, hey man, I just noticed that you're acting off a little bit. Is everything all right? How's home? Just start the conversation. That's sometimes all it takes for that burden to relieve, because that person feels seen. It's like, oh man, this person just creates this safe space for me to actually say, hey, you know what? No, I'm hurting right now, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of it's like a catch-22. I think it's a conundrum that most men feel, because we know that a lot of our value comes from being able to provide, be that rock, be solid, be strong mentally, emotionally, physically, and we're rewarded for that. Society, culture, women, other men rewards us for having that strength. And I think for a lot of men that I've worked with over the last decade, it's like, well, wait, am I not supposed to be strong? Like, I think that's what my wife or my girlfriend or my boyfriend, like that's what they're actually asking for from me. They're wanting me to be robust. They're wanting me to be resilient. They're wanting me to have grit and determination. And so I think for a lot of men, there's recognizing that it is something that's extremely valuable to the world. It's recognizing that it's also very rewarding for us, because I think every man, who does develop some type of mental strength, emotional ability and acuity, physical strength, et cetera, just go down the list, he feels rewarded by that internally. But then it can turn into a kind of prison, where if you over index on that and you don't allow yourself to receive any support or help or praise from outside of you, then all of a sudden it can morph into this really negative experience of isolation and desperateness. And I have to, do everything by myself. And then you're bitter and resentful towards your partner and friends and the world and the government. And, and so,
Yep.
it really is funny how this thing that we as men are rewarded for and kind of expected to achieve, this thing can really morph into one of our greatest pitfalls. Would you agree with that? Or like, how would you look at
100%.
that?
No, for sure. I think that's exactly where we're stuck in. And I think there's a very simple solution to that. It's simple, but not so simple, else everyone won't be doing it. But the simple fact is, like, we just need to change perspective again, because it's not been like this. It's only been like this for what, maybe 100, 150 years or so. But we need to change perspective because it is a strength. And as soon as we start to see it as a strength, all of a sudden our chest goes out, our chin goes up. Oh, okay, so I'm strong when I reach out, which is actually true. But we just need to change perspective again on the fact that you can still be a leader. You can still be a rock. I think you're even better of a leader if you just sometimes say, I need help with this one. We can go there together. And towards in relationships as well, like if you as a man just says, hey, you know what, I don't have the answers to this, but I will find the answers, like I will find help to get there. You show that vulnerability, you become even more of a man to your woman by just showing that you've got that emotional side to yourself as well. Like it is not a weakness, and that's the thing that we need to change. That's the thing we need to lose, is that it's not like one or the other, that if you show emotion, all of a sudden you're less of a man. No, you're more of a man if you show it. It's not like black and white. Like there's more to it. Um, and I fully vouch for be the rock, be the leader, be that man, stand tall, chest out, chin up. It's good for you. But also know that you have this other side that's fully allowed to be there, and it doesn't make you anything less of a man. Opposite is true. It will make you more of a man. But it's again up to us to show each other, and again to lead by example. It just takes that one friend in a group of friends to say it out loud. And I can assure you that maybe not in a group session, they might kick your chin first, but afterwards they'll come back to you. Hey man, thanks for saying it, because I'm actually going through this right now. I can assure you that it will open up that space. Your mates, your colleagues, wherever, your teammates, be that one person that says, hey, this is what I'm going through. And I can assure you someone else will say, hey, me too, man. And that will open up the conversation. And that will show you by practice that it's not going to make you anything less of a man. And I think a cool thing to know about that as well, that it's been like that for thousands of years. We sat on rocks in circles, men coming together, and we learned from each other, and we shared stories, and young men learned from older men how to become a man by talking, by sharing stories. The wilder men did it. The samurai did it. We have all these really cool Hollywood movies. They show this one aspect of being a warrior. Battles, the spear in one hand, shield in the other hand. But what they don't show in the movies, but what is written, is that after battle, they would nurture each other before they went back to their wives and families. They would be there for each other to mourn their losses. They would, wrap an arm around each other to say like, hey, let's go through this together. They would heal each other wounds so they wouldn't drop it on their wives and children. What happens a lot right now is, at some point the bomb bursts and we just drop everything on our family, and they're not there to deal with your shit. We as men, it's my opinion, we as men need to help each other so we can safeguard and protect and keep them away from all your misery, in that sense of just don't dump it on them. You can talk about it, but don't dump it on them. But like I said, it's been like that for thousands of years. Like we need to come back to that warrior man that stands tall and strong, but also is there for his mate after a battle.
It does seem that along, like we've kind of, there's a saying in the West that like, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? And I think that part of what's happened in the, and I'm like trying to word this in a way that I'm not going to get launched at online, but I think I'm just going to say it anyways. I think
Good.
part of what happened with the attempt of dismantling the quote unquote patriarchy was that what came along with that was the villainization of any type of men's spaces and the view that men hold all the power, men shouldn't be allowed to gather. I remember when I started Man Talks 10 years ago, I literally for years would get messages, like hateful messages from people. I mean, a lot of women initially, but men and women as well, saying like, why do men need this? Men already have everything. Men already control all the spaces. Why do men need another space? And it's like, well, hold on. How many spaces are there for men to talk about what they're going through, to share support for one another, to create maturity and elderhood? That's not what a lot of spaces are for men. Like modern male spaces are sports oriented, finance oriented. They are not about emotional, psychological, soul oriented, spiritual oriented health. That's not what they're about. So it was very interesting when I started the company that there was so much hatred. And I think it was very telling because it's almost like you can be almost assured that when you catch that much flack and that much resistance that you're onto something, when people launch at you that hard, and even just the name Man Talks. I mean, I got so many people like, like what do men need to talk about? And like, everything from like, this is gay, you're a cuck, to like, men to all the way to the other side of the extreme of like men just need to have cuddle parties and cry with each other. And it's like, oh my gosh, like this is, there's so much misunderstanding of men, how men operate. And there seems to be so little interest in actually genuinely understanding how to support men. I think I've said this stat on the show before, but there was a study that was done in the UK and it looked at male suicide. And what it found was that 91% of the men who had taken their own lives had sought out therapeutic help at some level. And 80% of those men who had sought out therapeutic support, they had been deemed as low risk of suicide or no risk at all. Yeah. And so we really do have a culture of, even in the therapeutic space, I think the therapeutic industry has done, and I've said this before, a real like piss poor job of being able to support men and meet men where they're at. I think that the biggest problem within modern psychology and modern therapy is that it approaches men's issues from a female-oriented lens. And it misses out on large pieces of what men actually need to do in order to find mental health, because those things are in some ways fundamentally different from what women go to therapy for. A lot of men they want to feel competent, and they want to feel competent in their emotions, in their decisions. They want to feel competent in how they show up in their relationship and their communication. But that's not necessarily what the majority of women are going into therapy for. They're looking for, I mean, I don't want to speak for what, because that'll just get me, I'll just have tons of like, this is not what women want. And so I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. But I think that having worked with so many men, having worked with so many therapists and psychologists and counselors and coaches, and having them as clients and supporting them, what I've noticed a lot of, and then digging into the therapeutic, kind of being outside of the therapeutic industry, as somebody that's very skilled in therapeutic practices and modalities, it's like that whole space needs an overhaul. And in terms of how it approaches men's issues, because it's almost like taboo to say that men and women are different and how they approach their problems are different, and what causes problems internally for men and women might actually be different. That's like, ooh, that, like, that's a big thing that you shouldn't say. And it's like, well,
Yeah,
how the
yeah,
fuck are we supposed to solve anything for guys
yeah.
if we're not allowed to say maybe what's causing men to take their own lives is different than what causes women to do that, and that
Yeah.
we should be able to study that.
Yeah, I think it's clear as daylight that is the fact. And then, like you said as well, like it's like this very delicate thing to discuss, because we can't, like, everything has to blend in, everything has to be equal and the same thing. Like, no, there's just differences in our biology. We just need different ways of dealing with it than women, and that's fine. Like, it doesn't say the one is better than the other. It's just different. Um, I had the same thing. Like, my campaign was called Brave Man Talk. I had it over and over again, the same discussion, like, oh, why men, for example. And then I think a very important note on that is that it's, if us men do not take care of our mental health, the numbers in you know discrimination, in sexual abuse, in violence anywhere, like on at home, it's just going to grow and grow. Like, it's, we have way many more women that are dealing with men that are violent or just misbehaving in whatever way. So that's why we need to work on our mental health. It's not just like, oh, but you guys have so much already. No, no, no. This is the issue that we have, and this is what we need to do to actually help you guys as well, and to have kids that grow up with a better sense of what it means to be like a healthy masculine man, or what like a healthy relationship looks like. Therefore, we need to work on our mental health.
I'm just going to jump in there. I also think
Sure.
that we need to shift the perspective and the narrative, and really push back on this perspective that men are at the cornerstone of the problem within society and modern relationships. Like, when you look at the data out of the UK, out of the US, there are a lot of men that experience domestic violence and domestic abuse. And a lot of the data shows that when domestic violence, and this isn't every single time, so I don't want to make it sound like that's what I'm saying, but a lot of the times, I don't remember what the stat is, when domestic violence happens, it's both partners that are contributing to the domestic violence. It's not just one party. But what ends up happening is that men don't speak out about domestic violence. We don't see it as a real issue because men are stronger than women. There's a whole bunch of stigma around a man talking about domestic violence, and those types of things. And that's just one example. But I think at the core of it is this notion that women are the victims and men are the trespassers. That is very prominent in our culture. Now, that isn't to say that men don't enact more violent crimes than women. They certainly do. But when you drill down into the data, it is a very small percentage of men that are repeat offenders. They're doing these things over and over and over and over and over again. And so what can happen is that you can see the data and you can have the perspective of, well, the volume of men that are committing violent crimes against women is so much greater than women committing violent crimes against men, that you can have the perspective of, well, many men are violent against women, or many men are violent just in general. It's like, well, no, it's that data and those stats take into account guys that are repeating that violent crime. And so, but I do think that I talked about this in an episode where I talked about what I call the patriarchy virus, where there's a notion in Western and modern culture that every problem socially, relationally, economically can be traced back to men. And it's the patriarchy's fault, and it's men's fault, and men need to take responsibility for it. And it, in some ways, it takes women out of the equation. And I think it amplifies what a lot of the pressure that a lot of men feel, which is like, man, I'm the problem for everything. And I talk to a lot of young guys who feel that way, where they're like, I watch the news, I go on social media, and it seems like I am the villain for absolutely everything that's wrong in the world. Like, why should I even bother contributing to society when I haven't even graduated high school, I haven't even graduated college, and like I just have the target on my back of like, you're the problem with society. So how do how do you think about communicating with young men that are maybe growing up in a culture that I don't want to say is anti-male, because I think that's dramatic, but
Mm.
that are growing up in a culture where they're hearing a lot of these narratives of like, men are the problem, men need to get their shit together, guys just need to be better, just sort of blanket statements like that, who,
Yeah.
a lot of young men sort of feel like, how am I supposed to even contribute when I'm just seen as the problem?
Yeah. Well, I think the solution to, well, not say that's just one solution, but a solution is what I mentioned before, like young men learn to be men from other men. And I think we need to ingrain that more into like normal life. Let's say have groups like that in schools where men can just come together and learn from each other. Like, hey, what's going on in your mind? What's going on in your brain? And have a discussion about it. So, because what happens with a lot of teenagers nowadays, like you get social media, you don't talk, so you get all this information, but you don't let it out. Like, so that becomes the truth. Where if, as a young man, you just have these conversations already, you burst that bubble, you get more information. You feel like, oh, okay, so maybe what I understood from just seeing these videos is not the truth.
Mm.
There is like different truths out there, and I can search for my own. But to have these conversations in schools already, I think, is the most important thing to do right now for young men. Um, I always say a little less of Pythagoras and a little bit more of about life, and it definitely counts. Like it counts for girls and boys, but I think especially for boys because, like you said, they feel that pressure of having to be a certain way already from a young age. Like I eventually need to be that leader. I need to be the provider. You haven't even left, high school yet, and you already feel that way. You already feel that pressure. Suicide amongst teenage boys is again the number one cause of death for a lot of teenagers. It's like freaking ridiculous. Like they shouldn't die at all. But if they do, they should die from being stupid enough to jump from a roof because they're just being boys, not from mental health issues because they're just boys. They just start life. So let's start focusing on the whole system, on how we teach or what we teach our boys and how we do it. Like you said, like in the whole therapeutical system, it's the same thing. We need to, redevelop certain programs. I think we're like have different looks on how to deal with certain situation when it comes to men's mental health, but especially with young boys. Like we need to plant the seeds as early as possible that talking about these emotions and going through these mindsets or thoughts is one, okay, but also that you need to talk about it. And if there's any young boy listening right now, please talk about it, because whatever you see on social media or on in the movies or whatever, it's not true. It's not. It's Don't stay in your own bubble and make everything the truth and make it heavy and heavy. Please chat, and your bubble will burst. You'll get different insights, and you'll feel lighter and better about it. And you'll get the right tools on how to navigate through these emotions and whatever you might be dealing with.
Mm.
Tools that are way more important than just grammatics or math.
I think this is a good segue into the sort of connection between physical pain, physical resiliency, and emotional struggles,
Mm.
And what I really love about your journey is that it really is at that intersection of physical discomfort, a lot of physical
Mm.
discomfort, and then the emotional struggles that come along with that. And so I'm curious about how you see the relationship for men, especially of having physical discomfort, the role that it plays in
Mm-hmm.
being able to teach you about how to deal with your emotions, and how we can create, or how, young men or older men can create opportunities for themselves to actively. But maybe I'll ask it a more simple way. Why do you think it's important for men to do hard shit?
um, because that's ingrained in our DNA. That's who we are. We're not supposed to be sitting in a chair all day in an office and then sit in a car and then go to our couch and eat crap all day. Our body's supposed to move. That's how it's designed. That's why we feel miserable when we sit for too long, and that's why we feel great when we go for a run or we go to the gym or whatever you want to do. That's why our body starts creating happy chemicals when we start moving. Like it's ingrained in us. So, and especially for men, it's kind of like going back to the older days. That's our task. Like we are supposed to be warriors defending our, freedom and safeguarding the women and children in our life. You won't be able to do that when you're, just lazy in your chair and not moving at all. Um, you'll never get that sense of confidence from your chair. You will not grow in your safety bubble. It's ingrained in us to move, to get stronger, to lift heavy things, to run. It will create like a sense of confidence that will create like a feeling like no water, that you are on top of this world and that you can, if you want, you can safeguard your family. Not that you, because that's where it goes wrong a lot as well. That we go into that direction, but then we get into this kind of, I don't like using the word toxic, but we start to abuse our strengths. So we get physically abusive or emotionally abusive because we feel strong. No, just know that you can doesn't mean that you have to use it. But I think the knowing that you can is something that we all have to have, like that sense of confidence. And the same goes on for your mind. Like I always say, like if you train your biceps, train your mind as well. Like it's another muscle for you to to go to the fitness for. Um, Understand how your brain works, understand who you are and how you respond to certain situations. Like it's just as powerful to know that you can lift like bench press 100 kilos. I don't know how much that in pounds. Um, or to know that, hey, I'm being triggered right now and I've got a choice on how to respond, and I'm gonna let my emotions control my response. I know how to observe my emotions and how to respond in a certain way that I keep control in that sense, and I'm not like outbursting or whatever, or okay, this is the time just to let my emotions go and I'm crying.
Do you think
It's
sorry to interrupt you, but do you think that men need to go through physical hardship in order to have some level of emotional mastery, or can they attain deep emotional mastery without having to go through some type of physical hardship?
ooh, I think I think you can do it without physical hardship, because some like heartbreak, for example, is one of the toughest things to have to go through in life, and that will teach you a lot of tools or how you deal with certain things as well. Um, but I think for us, that's a very negative way of feeling it. I think the most positive way to gain that strength and to gain that knowledge is by challenge yourself physically. Like it's a healthy way of learning and growing and getting stronger at it. So yes, I think we need the physical challenges in our life, and we need to pick it. Like we need to get out of our comfort zones. We need to get off our lazy butt. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree, because I've always wondered about this of, you look at even monks as an example. I mean, they sit for hours and it's not comfortable. If you've ever meditated for more than 5 minutes, you know how much discomfort can arise physically, mentally, emotionally. And I do think that there is something for us as men about confronting discomfort and being able to intentionally put ourselves into situations, whether it's a hard conversation or something physical or something that, we risk being rejected, that develops us emotionally and psychologically in a way that that we can't get otherwise. And I think that part of the issue that a lot of men are experiencing today is that, modernity has kind of sold them this bill of goods that says, if you seek comfort, you'll be happy. And a lot of men attain some level of comfort in their life and they're fucking miserable,
Yes.
because there's nothing for them to press up against. There's no discomfort in their life. And you begin to atrophy psychologically and emotionally. And I mean, it's really such a strange thing. It's like I've had a couple guests on the show where we've talked about, do you have to go through real hardship? Do you have to go through some type of, whether you want to call it trauma or, extreme discomfort or extreme hardship to really achieve some kind of greatness? And I'm starting to believe that the answer is more and more like, yeah, you do have to put yourself into things and experiences and create opportunities for yourself to be really uncomfortable and to get that level of discomfort to sharpen yourself.
I think I think it was Tom Brady, he had like an awesome speech about that, in the win, like when, like, because they were winning so much, like I did not learn anything from winning Super Bowls. Like it's cool, but it doesn't do anything to me. Winning all these games doesn't teach me anything. It's when shit hit the fan, when everything was destructive, when I wasn't picked, when we were losing, when physically I had an injury. That's when I was learning. That's when I felt alive. Like I'm not really sure what he said, but like it got to that point where it's like the winning stands for comfort. In comfort, you're not going to win anything. Like it's just going to make you numb. It's about the challenges. The challenges will make you grow. The challenge will make you stronger. It sounds so cliche, but it's so needed because, like, fact is, the vast majority of population has become weak because of all the comforts we have. That's why we have so much disease. That's why we have so much mental distress. We have become weak because of all the comforts. We need to go back to the basics and understand again what are the important things, and challenge is part of that. Like, again, back in the days, they had challenges every day just to survive. Now you go to your kitchen and it's like, I don't know, whatever you want is right there. We need to, we need to go back to the basics of what made us thrive as humans, and that is definitely, the challenges. We were out in the cold, we were out in the heat, we had to survive. We were part of nature. We were eating healthy. We were exercising because we had to go out and catch our own food. I'm not saying we have to go back to being cavemen again, but understand the pure basics of what it means to be human. Get yourself out of that comfort zone and get yourself in that spot again. Make yourself long for food. Fasting in that sense is another challenge you can do. Get used to not eat every single hour because that's one of the most unhealthy things you can do. A challenge lies in so many things you can do for yourself, and there's so many healthy ways of challenging yourself, but in that growing, understanding yourself better and knowing how to respond better and to stand taller and stronger.
Beautiful, man. Well, that feels like a good place for us to maybe begin to wrap up today. Give our listeners a little bit about where they can find you and maybe what challenge you're looking to next. I know you're in full recovery mode, so maybe you're like, I'm not looking at anything right now. But where they can find you, follow along in your journey, learn from you, and maybe what challenge you got next.
Cool. Well, they can follow the journey mainly on Instagram, the Barefoot Dutchman. If the is not there, it doesn't come up for some reason. So the Barefoot Dutchman. Same for Facebook, Anton Notenboom. I think it will come somewhere in the text because it's a difficult last name. And you can find me on the website bravemantalk.com. And I will come to the US as well to do a men's retreat by the end of the year, it's awesome. It'll be awesome to see you then as well. And I will be doing another challenge. Like, I'll never ever do something huge like this again. That's going to take like almost an entire year to finish. But there's one I want to do in a year and a half. There's a Guinness World Record of the longest barefoot run in 24 hours, which stands at, I think it was 130 miles or something like that. Oof. I hate running. Like, if I run for like 2 miles right now, I'm dead. So that's where the challenge lies. I want to go from, absolutely zero to running a new Guinness World Record in about a year and a half, something like that. So I'll be training for that over the next let's say the next year or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for everything that you're doing for men and the example that you're setting, and, being able to press yourself and push yourself physically in this way, sharing your wisdom and your lessons as you go along, I think is really, really inspiring for a lot of guys. And so thank you for everything that you're doing, buddy. Keep in touch. For everybody that's out there, we'll have the links to Anton's social in the show notes if you're having trouble finding it, just in case. And until next week, as always, don't forget to man it forward. Man it forward. Share this episode with somebody that you know will enjoy it. And until next week, this is Connor Beaton signing off.